Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Ashrafil Anbiya wal Mursaleen, Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. Now the next topic which we are going to be looking at from the course book is page number 24, and the first topic regarding the problems faced by Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu as a Khalif. Now when Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was chosen as the first Khalifa of Islam, he had some issues. And the first issue which he had to deal with was that some people, they refused to give zakat, which led to Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu waging war against them. Now I need to explain this particular ruling or this particular point in some detail, because sometimes quite a few things are misunderstood when it comes to this particular issue. Now when Rasulullah passed away, there were four groups. The Muslim Ummah, in a way, split up into four. The majority of the Ummah, they remained on the deen. So when Rasulullah passed away, the majority of the Sahabas, they were on the deen, they were on the haqq. Number two, the second kind of distribution of the Muslim Ummah after Rasulullah's death was that some people then started following certain other people who claimed to be prophets. And they were Aswad al-Anasi and Musaylama al-Kadhdhab. They were two people, after Rasulullah passed away, claimed to be prophets, claimed to be nabis. Aswad al-Anasi and Musaylama al-Kadhdhab. So what happened, brothers and sisters, was that some of the Muslims then started following them. And then the remaining two groups, they were split amongst those people who flatly refused to give zakat to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So in other words, after Rasulullah passed away, the third group, what they did was that they believed in Allah, they believed in praying salah and fasting in the month of Ramadan and going for Hajj. They believed in all that. But when it came to zakat, they didn't believe in zakat. They said that while zakat was only obligatory during Prophet ﷺ's time, but it's not obligatory now. And then the fourth group were those people who didn't actually flatly refuse zakat. But what happened was that they were saying to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu that we don't want to give zakat to you, but we want to give zakat ourselves. In other words, they didn't want to give directly the zakat to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, but they wanted to give it themselves. They were thinking that, well, why should an imam or amir should kind of force us to give zakat? We'll give it our own self, like we do in this country. No leader, no one kind of forcing us to give zakat. I know we give it out of our own will, but there's no pressure from above to give zakat. So that was the fourth group after Rasulullah's death. Now basically, Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he was waging war against group 3 for flatly refusing zakat, because zakat is an obligation of Islam. as mentioned in the hadith, أُمِرْتُ أَنْ أُقَاتِلَ النَّاسِ, I have been ordered to wage war against people unless they say the kalima, وَإِقَامِ الصَّلَاةِ وَإِيتَاءِ الزَّكَاةِ. Unless they say the kalima and they observe salah and they give zakat. So zakat, it's one of the obligations, basic tenets of Islam. You refuse, you reject, then you will not be in the fold of Islam. So Abu Bakr anhu was waging war against group 3, and also he was waging war against group 4 as well. The fourth group, who were saying that we don't want to give you zakat, but we want to give it to ourselves. Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhu, he was waging war against them as well. Now you may be thinking, that's a bit harsh. Why was Abu Bakr then waging war against them? Now the reason why Abu Bakr anhu wanted to wage war against them is that he thought that they were manipulating the situation. They were taking advantage of the situation. In other words, I'm asking them for zakat, but they're saying that, oh, I'll give it tomorrow, I'll give it some other time. Or we don't want to give it to you, but we'll give it by our own will or whenever we decide. So what happened was that Abu Bakr anhu was thinking that these people were kind of taking advantage. You know, it's like sometimes when say students or anyone, like you tell them to attend lessons, they'll say, oh, we'll do it next week or a week after or a month, or someone who owes you money but he's kind of playing around with you, he's saying, okay, I'll pay you end of this month, next month, 3 months time. So similarly here, when Abu Bakr anhu was asking them for zakat, they were saying, well, okay, we don't want to give it to you, but we'll give it whenever we want. Abu Bakr anhu was thinking that these people are manipulating the situation and they're taking advantage, and he wanted to wage war against them. And that's why you find the hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari that Abu Bakr anhu wanted to wage war, but Umar anhu was saying to Abu Bakr anhu that, you know what, I think you shouldn't wage war against them. You shouldn't wage war. Now what I'm trying to explain is that if they were group number 3, total rejectors and deniers of zakat, then Umar anhu, being so blunt and straightforward, and everybody knows the hadiths of Umar anhu, that whenever he suspected someone to be a hypocrite, what would you always say to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Ya Rasulullah, give me permission, adrib unukahu, to chop his head off. That's how Umar anhu dealt with people. So if Umar anhu basically, the reason why Umar anhu didn't want to wage war against them was that he thought that actually, you know what, yeah, they don't want to give zakat to us, they want to give it themselves. They're not denying zakat, so let's let them off. If they were from group 3 and they were total rejectors and deniers of zakat, then Hazrat Umar anhu would have said, yeah, let's go for it, let's go and wage war against them. But because they were from group 4, that's why Umar anhu was saying to Abu Bakr anhu, you know what, have a think about it. Do you really want to wage war against them? When you look at it, they're not rejecting zakat, but they don't want to give zakat to us, they want to give zakat themselves. But Abu Bakr anhu, and I'll explain this later on as well, why he took that stance. Abu Bakr anhu was very forthright. He said, no, unless they give zakat to me, I'm going to be waging war against them. Obviously the situation got sorted out later, and Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhu and the Muslims, they didn't need to wage war against them, but that was the intention Abu Bakr anhu had. It was this, the reason why he took this approach was to show everyone that we as Muslims, we mean business. In other words, you're not going to get away with anything here. Sometimes it happens at the very beginning when leaders or anyone who's in charge of a company or whatever organization, at the very beginning, they make all these kind of like big decisions just to show everyone that, yeah, we boss here, you can't mess with us and so on. So here, Abu Bakr anhu taking this stance, it was not to warn the Muslims, it was actually to warn the non-Muslims who were around Arabia. Because what was happening was that when Rasulullah passed away, the Romans and the Persians, we'll look at this later, they thought, oh, this is a great opportunity to attack the Muslims, because they're in total disarray, their spiritual leader, their leader, Rasulullah passed away, this is the time to attack and wipe them all away. So Sayyidina Abu Bakr, he took up the mantelpiece of being the Khalifa. So he wanted to give this impression that, you know what, I'm straightforward here. We're not going to mess around, we mean business. Even to the extent that he said he was like obviously willing to wage war against his own people to show the non-Muslim, that was his main intention, that look, I'm even willing to wage war against them for not giving me zakat. They weren't denying zakat. Because they were not giving me zakat, I'm willing to wage war against them. So you people, you Persians and Romans, who are not on the same level as us, who are not on the same deen as us, you try to attack Medina, you try to attack Mecca, see what happens to you. So that was the, you could say, the policy, you know, the foreign policy Sayyidina Abu Bakr took to make sure that no one messes with the Islamic State at that particular time. So these were that was the first main issue, which obviously Sayyidina Abu Bakr through his wisdom and hikmah, he kind of sorted. Which then takes me on to the next point on page 24. Sayyidina Usama bin Zayd anhu's army, or his expedition. As I was mentioning before that, Usama bin Zayd anhu, his father Zayd bin Harisa was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's adopted son. And Zayd bin Harisa, his father, passed away in 8th Hijri during the Battle of Muta. That's the name of the Battle of Muta. And this battle, brothers and sisters, is known as Jayshul Imara, the Battle of Leaders. And another, subhanAllah, amazing thing about this particular battle is that Muta is a place around 200 miles away from Medina. So Absalom didn't go for this battle, but he was in Medina and the veil opened. So in other words, everything opened in front of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was seeing what was happening in the battle. He actually had like proper vision of what was happening in the battle. So everything, the veil, everything opened up, and the plain of Muta was right in front of Absalom, and he was witnessing what was happening. So everybody knows that the reason why this battle is known as the Battle of Leaders, Jayshul Imara, or the Army of Leaders, is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam firstly said that Zayd bin Harisa, he will be the Amir, he will be the leader. And when he is martyred, then Hazrat Ja'far anhu would be the leader. And when he is martyred, then Abdullah bin Rawaha anhu would be the leader. And when he is martyred, then the Muslims should decide. And as Rasulullah predicted, one after the other they were martyred. Zayd bin Harisa, Ja'far anhu, Abdullah bin Rawaha anhu were martyred. And there afterwards Khalid bin Walid anhu, at that time he converted to Islam, he took the flag and he then defeated the Romans. So basically this was Zayd bin Harisa, Usama bin Zayd's father. He passed away or was martyred during the Battle of Muta. Now as I was explaining that before Rasulullah passed away, he made a will, a desire that make sure you send Usama bin Zayd anhu again towards the Romans, towards the Christians and the Persians, to wage war against them. Now Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam chose Usama bin Zayd anhu to be the leader. And Usama bin Zayd, when he was made the leader, he was only 21 years old, very young. You know, it's like, say for example, a modern example, like a 21-year-old, say, being the made imam of a big masjid, or a 21-year-old, say, teaching Sahih al-Bukhari at a madrasa. And it's like a very young person, but he was given a very big duty. So a lot of people, so obviously after Rasulullah passed away, Abu Bakr anhu decided to send this army, this expedition of Usama bin Zayd anhu. And people were saying to Abu Bakr anhu that, what on earth are you doing? Look how young he is. He's only 21 years old. You know, he's young. You know, you should send a more experienced muhajir, a more experienced Ansari Sahabi to lead the Muslims. So Abu Bakr anhu was saying, well, why shall I change when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam chose Usama bin Zayd anhu to be the leader? So why should I change the Amir And when obviously Sayyidina Abu Bakr who said that, he then sent Usama bin Zayd anhu, and obviously under Usama bin Zayd anhu's stewardship, they managed to defeat the Romans and the Persians. So that was Usama bin Zayd anhu's expedition. Now moving along to the next point, this is on page 26. The collection of the Holy Quran. Now another amazing or another great moment during Abu Bakr anhu's time was that during his time, or during Abu Bakr anhu's Khilafat, he gave permission, he signaled the beginning of the very first copy of the Holy Quran, i.e. the very first copy in a book format of the Holy Quran. So this happened during Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhu's time. Now let me just explain, obviously we look at it when we do the course of Uthman anhu. This Mus'haf, or this Quran which we have in front of us, you probably heard, it's also known as Mus'haf-e-Uthmani. I'm sure you probably heard of it before. And the reason why it's called the Mus'haf of Sayyidina Uthman anhu is because during his Khilafat, the Holy Quran which we have in front of us, this Quran was compiled. In other words, with Surah Fatih at the beginning, Surah Baqarah, Surah Ali Imran, Surah Nisa, the way the surahs have been formed, this happened during Uthman anhu's time. Now, during Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, whenever a verse was revealed, what would happen is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would call, say, Zayd bin Thabit anhu or any other Sahabas, and he would recite the verse, and that respective Sahaba would just write the verse down on a piece of, say, paper, or say, for example, on some slabs of stones, whatever, bamboo, and they would just write it down like that. Now what happened was that during Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhu's time, there was a battle known as the Battle of Yamama. And in this Battle of Yamama, many Huffaz, many people who have memorized the Holy Quran lost their lives. Many of the Sahabas were Hafiz-e Quran, they had memorized the Holy Quran. So many of the Sahabas, they lost their lives in this particular Battle of Yamama. So Umar anhu, he approaches Abu Bakr anhu, and he says to Abu Bakr anhu that, look, if we have further casualties of Huffaz and those who have memorized the Holy Quran, we will have a scenario where the Quran will disappear from everyone. Because if all the Huffaz, all the people who have memorized the Quran are being martyred left, right and center, what will happen is that the Holy Quran will disappear. There will be no one to preserve the Holy Quran, because at that time, the way the Quran was being preserved, it was through memory. So therefore, Hazrat Umar anhu convinced Abu Bakr anhu that we should actually have the Holy Quran in a book format. Now initially Abu Bakr anhu did not agree. He was saying that, look, how can we do something which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not do himself? But Umar anhu was convincing Abu Bakr anhu that, no, there's khair in this, there's goodness in this, yes, we should do it, we should go ahead with it. So after Umar anhu managed to convince Abu Bakr anhu then called Zayd bin Thabit. And Zayd bin Thabit, I'm sure, very famous Sahabi, you have heard his name before. But he is known because he was known as Qatib-e-Wahi. In other words, he was the scribe of the Wahi. So every time Wahi would be revealed, he would come and write it and jot it down. So Umar anhu called him and gave him the duty and the responsibility to basically compile the Holy Quran. They told him that, look, you used to write the Wahi, you have more knowledge of the surahs and the verses, and in this particular way, the Quran was compiled in a book format. And you may be thinking, well, okay, if it was compiled in a book format, then what's so special about that Quran and this Quran here? So the difference is that this Quran, the Musaf al-Uthmani which we have, it's in order. With Surah Fatiha, then straight away you have Surah Baqarah, after Surah Baqarah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Ali Imran. Whereas the Musaf of Abu Bakr anhu, it wasn't in order. It was just like written, but it wasn't placed in order. So you could have had, I don't know, Surah Baqarah at the beginning and Surah Amma Yatasaalun second. It was in order. That order was put in by Uthman anhu. Obviously, we look at that when we do the course of Uthman anhu in a bit more detail. But he was the first one, during his stewardship, during his Khilafat, Abu Bakr anhu gave the green light to have the Quran at least written. Obviously, it wasn't in order, but come as come, it was actually written now. Unlike during Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam time that it was written here and there, but the way the Quran was preserved was through memory. During Abu Bakr anhu's time, during his Khilafat, the Quran was actually now gathered in a, obviously written, stored together, even though it wasn't in order, the way of the surah, it wasn't compiled in order, but at the very least it was written and it was brought together. So during Uthman anhu's time, when it was then put in a book format, it was much easier for Uthman anhu and Zayd bin Sabit anhu then to put it into a book format. So that is the collection of the Holy Quran. It started during Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhu's time. The next kind of topic here, page 26, is regarding the conquests or the battles of Abu Bakr anhu. Now we'll obviously briefly look at the battles. There's not that much explanation regarding the battles other than what I just mentioned, the course book there. But just some additional information I want to add about the battles. They are, as I was explaining before, that there were three main fundamental parts of Hazrat Abu Bakr anhu's leadership. You know, the way he established justice, his foreign policies. There were three main parts to it. The first part, brothers and sisters, was to initially, when he took charge, was to place fear and awe into the hearts of the enemies. So when he took control, he wanted to show the non-Muslims around, in particular the Persians and the Romans, that don't you dare attack us. So he wanted to put some fear, hope and awe into their hearts. And the way he did that, as I just explained, was number one, by sending Usama bin Zayd anhu's army towards them. So he didn't wait and think, oh, let's just wait a few years and then send Usama bin Zayd anhu's army. No, let's send his army straight away. And the second way, as I was explaining a short while ago, is that those Muslims who weren't willing to give zakat to him, he was willing to wage war against them. So in this way, he kind of struck some hope and some fear and some awe into the hearts of the enemies. So that was his first way of dealing with the Khilafat and the issue of running the Islamic State and the Islamic government. The second way, brothers and sisters, is that after establishing that initial fear and awe, he then established justice. Because as Abu Bakr anhu knew, and everyone will say this as well, you can't run a government through oppression. you can't run anything through zulm or oppression. You can't run anything. Yeah, you can run it for a few months, but then what will happen is that people will then rebel against you. And we kind of see that only Allah knows best how true these stories are from the Middle East. Only Allah knows best, but we see these leaders being toppled by the people. Why? Because only Allah knows best how true it is that apparently they are oppressing the people. But what I'm trying to say is that, yeah, first of all, you have that robe, we call it, the awe and the fear. Thereafterwards, you establish justice. You be fair. Because you can't run a government or any other things, whether it's like a madrasa or a mosque or any other organization, through zulm and through oppression. What will then happen eventually is that the employees, your students, whoever, they will kind of rebel against you. So the way to make sure that they are on your side is through justice. Because when you are fair, I think everybody will agree on this point that if you are fair, everybody will like you. If you know that I'm going to deal with Abdullah the same way I deal with Abdul Rahman, Abdul Rahman won't have any issues with me. Why? Because they know that the same mistakes Abdullah makes, Abdul Rahman is going to be punished for the same mistakes. It's not like Abdullah is going to get punished, Abdul Rahman is not going to get punished. Because that's not being fair. So that's the second way because obviously as I was trying to say is that if you want to gain people's heart and trust, you do it through justice, you do it through adl. And then the third way, subhanAllah, or the third kind of policy used to run the Islamic government or the state is that after conquering, he gave people freedom of religion. After conquering, he gave people freedom of religion. So even after conquering, as I was explaining before, La ikraha fi din. There was no force in accepting religion, in accepting deen. And this is what I want to mention. I'll mention this firstly on the slide here. That a lot of people have this notion or beliefs that Islam was spread through force. No, it was never spread through force. Because if it was ever spread through force, then what would happen is that there would hardly be any believers. Because, you can't spread anything through force. Yeah, you can forcefully convert, but after a few months, a year, they will go back to their own religion. The old whatever religion they is, they'll go back to that. And I've just obviously mentioned this particular slide here, that whenever Rasulullah ﷺ sent letters to the various kings, Hiraqal and all these other Roman kings and emperors, even to the king of Ethiopia and so on, Najashi. Again, it was all the letter which Rasulullah ﷺ wrote, the da'wah, whatever, it was all firstly inviting them towards Islam. Now, if they don't accept Islam, then it was there afterwards, okay, give jizya and tax, but you could live in the Islamic state. And it was lastly after trying all avenues and efforts to make them believe or listen, then when they became an obstacle, because that's the whole point of battles and wars. Islam doesn't like wars and battles, because wars and battles in Islam is treated something like hasan li ghayrihi, like it's good but it's not really good. Because it's good for an external reason, that's why it's allowed. Killing someone isn't something which Islam kind of advocates because it's bad. But because sometimes that could be the only way to remove the obstacle, and the obstacle here, your aim here is to convey the deen, to convey the message. But people are becoming a barrier. So sometimes to remove that barrier, you may need to use force. And even sometimes, like people say this as well, that sometimes certain people, you need to be a bit more forceful on them. I'm not saying hitting them, but what I mean by that is that sometimes certain people need to be a bit more aggressive, shout at them and then they listen. Then there are other people that if you just speak to them nicely, they listen. So exactly here that sometimes giving da'wah to people, it just works. But for some people, you need to show a bit more force and then it works. And that's why, the system of battles and wars are allowed in Islam. But what I want to obviously mention is that, Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhu, he always gave basically the freedom of religion. So even after he conquered, he was always la ikraha fi din. Do you want to convert to Islam or not? And obviously, if they want to stay on their old deen and their old religion, then subhanAllah, Sayyidina Abu Bakr would allow that. Obviously, he wasn't happy with what they chose, but he, like I mentioned before, guidance comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so he allowed them to stay on their old religion, but on the condition that they give jizya and they give the tax. Now moving along to the next few pages, page 28, I'm going to explain about the expedition to Iraq. Page 30, the expedition of Iraq, and page 32, expedition of Syria. Again, and also page 34, the Battle of Ajnadayn. So these are just like some battles which happened during Hazrat Abu Bakr anhu's time. Obviously, so many battles happened. Obviously, we couldn't mention all of them because it would take too much time. But obviously, if you have a look at this slide here, you can see this place, which I'm kind of circling with the arrow, the place Hira. So this was obviously during Abu Bakr anhu's time. Khalid bin Walid anhu. He was like the trusted general of Abu Bakr anhu. Like Khalid bin Walid was a trusted general of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was also the trusted lieutenant and general of Abu Bakr anhu. So during his time, under Khalid bin Walid anhu's guidance and leadership, they conquered many places. And as you can see from these places here, Khazima, where there's an arrow or X, you could say that was a battle, and where there's like a red kind of box, it means there was a siege. So this blue route here is basically the route of Khalid bin Walid anhu. So this is like the route he took, all these places he conquered. Again, obviously this is all with, I know Khalid bin Walid anhu did it, but it was all done with Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhu's mashwara, advice and guidance. And obviously, you've got the course book in front of you. There were quite a number of places, Iraq, Syria, even other places as well, like Busra, which we're going to look at later. All these were conquered during Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhu's time. So a lot of these places were conquered during Abu Bakr anhu's time under the leadership of Khalid bin Walid anhu. Okay, we'll just move on to page 30. Okay, we'll move on to page 34. Obviously, the battles that you could have a look at in your own terms, not that much explanation rather than what was mentioned in the book. Obviously, time is also of the essence as well. So we'll look at the next part. Okay, now the next section here, page 34 in your course handbook, is regarding the inness of Hazrat Abu Bakr anhu and Hazrat Umar anhu's nomination, or nominating Hazrat Umar anhu to be the second Khalifa of Islam. Now there are two opinions regarding Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhu's inness. One opinion explains that Abu Bakr anhu, he once had a ghusl on a cold day, was having a shower or a bath on a cold day, and after he had the ghusl or the shower, he then caught a cold and he then fell ill. That's according to one opinion. Another opinion here, brothers and sisters, is that 1 year prior to his death, Hazrat Abu Bakr anhu was with some of his companions and they ate poisoned meat. They ate some poisoned meat. And like the case of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam during Khaybar, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was fed a poisoned mutton by that Jewish woman, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not feel the effect of the poison, but he felt it at the time of his death. And that's why, according to some scholars like Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahimahullah, it's also mentioned in the hadith of Musnad Ahmad, they treat the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to be the death of a martyr, because if you are poisoned to death, that's one of the ways of being killed as a martyr. There's different ways you could die as a martyr. The main way is obviously in the battlefield, but sometimes, dying through other ways like in accidents or brutally being killed, that is also considered to be a shaheed as well. So, second opinion is that Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhu, he ate some poisoned meat 1 year ago, but obviously the effect of the poison came into effect during his illness, which led to his death. Now, when Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhu, when he fell ill in the month of Jumada, Jumada Thaniya, and it was in the 13th year of Hijri. Now, when his illness kind of increased, or it worsened, and Abu Bakr anhu knew that his time in this world was coming to an end, he then called or invited the Sahabas to come to his house, and he did mashwara with them. He consulted them that who should be the next Khalifa. So obviously various people's names were nominated, but eventually Abu Bakr anhu proposed or decided that Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab anhu should be the next Khalifa after his death. So as you can see, a slight difference to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time. During Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, he let the Sahabas decide. You decide. But here, Abu Bakr anhu went for another option. He said that no, we let Umar anhu. So I propose, Umar anhu to be the first Khalifa of Islam. Now, why did Sayyidina Abu Bakr anhu choose Umar anhu, unlike in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's case where he left it to the Sahabas to decide? Because going according to what Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did, what Abu Bakr anhu should have done here is that he should have basically let the Sahabas decide who should be the next Khalifa. So why then, basically the question I'm asking is that why then Abu Bakr anhu chose Umar anhu as his successor? Now the simple answer, brothers and sisters, is that Abu Bakr anhu, he looked at the situation and he said to himself that there is no one better equipped to be my successor than Umar anhu. There's no one better than Umar anhu to be my Khalifa, to be my successor. For the case of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I mentioned his wisdom why he didn't do it, because he didn't want to establish a sunnah and so on, and he gave indications. Abu Bakr anhu chose a different path, and he said that Hazrat Umar anhu should be the next Khalifa, because there is no one basically more better than him. And from this I'll derive another point, or there's another point I want to mention, is that, do you know where there is, obviously as I said before, you shouldn't nominate yourself, and nor should you sometimes, over excel or go over the top in praise of other people. But where there is a responsibility or a duty, and you know that this person is the only person worthy of that, then to excel in his virtues or to explain to others about his virtues and about his ability to take up that post or that duty, then there's nothing wrong with that. But what I'm trying to say, brothers and sisters, is that it's in the hadith, وَلَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ, which means that do not, excel in other people's virtues. In other words, okay, there is a person, Abdurrahman, yeah, but don't go over the top in his fazilat, in his virtues. Oh, Abdurrahman is like this, is like that. This is something which Islam doesn't like. In particular, when it comes to hereafter issues. You get some people now, somebody passes away and they kind of give a guarantee this person is a Jannati. Like he's going to go to Jannah. Even this, even if he hasn't passed away, they'll say, oh, this guy is definitely going to go to Jannah. I know that he's going to go to Jannah. So this is something which the Sharia doesn't like. Why? Because remember, Jannah is not yours. It's Allah's, and it all depends on Allah's mercy whether He wants to grant that person Jannah or not. So you can't for sure or with certainty say that somebody's going to Jannah, someone's going to paradise. So as I was saying that, where you shouldn't excel in people's virtues, but where you know that somebody is the rightful person, the right person for this duty, then to make him or give him the job or the responsibility then becomes a right and a haqq upon you. And if you don't give that duty to that person, then you will be doing khiyanat, you then yourself will be betraying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look, if I know that so-and-so is the best imam for this mosque, or so-and-so has got the best recitation, he's the best imam for this mosque, I need to say it that yes, he is the best imam for the mosque. If I didn't keep it within my heart, then I am doing khiyanat. I am betraying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subhanallah. It's like the story of Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam. So when the king, decided that let's have this treasury where people's crops will gather, and then the king asked Yusuf alayhi salam, who should be the person in charge of this treasury? So what did Yusuf alayhi salam say? Ij'alni ala khaza'inil ard. That, O king, make me in charge. He's actually nominating himself in this one. Make me in charge. Why did Yusuf alayhi salam say that I want to be nominated for this post? Because he was the best person there to deal with it. Because the people around, they were all fasiq and transgressors. So Yusuf alayhi salam said, I am the best person for this job. I nominate myself. So similarly here, Abu Bakr, he looked around, he saw the candidates, and he said to himself, you know what, if they were all equal, then fair enough, I would have let them decide. But no one can match Umar in his fazilat, in his excellence, in his taqwa and piety. Obviously when we do the Umar course, we'll look at it there in a bit more detail about his taqwa and piety and so on. But they were saying, look, no one can match him. So because of that reason, Sayyidina Abu Bakr decided that Umar he should be the second Khalifa, or he should be my successor after my death. Now it's mentioned that one Sahabi, one companion, in the name of Talha bin Ubaidullah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he kind of disagreed with this particular proposal of Abu Bakr. He said, you know what, Umar is too harsh. Everybody knows how harsh Umar was. So he's saying Umar is too harsh, he's not the right candidate.